acknowledging that we do gather this evening on the traditional lands of the Coquitlam, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Matsui First Nations.
Curious. Okay, it's unmuted now because it asked me to unmute it.
Yeah, I need everybody to mute if you possibly can. That would be great. It's just muted everybody, so there you go. And so I'm incredibly pleased to welcome you all to our first virtual dinner meeting of 2020. I don't think it will be our last moving forward into the year. Please join me tonight in thanking our sponsor for tonight's event, Envision Financial. And Kay is here representing Envision Financial this evening, and we really, really appreciate their support moving forward with something that's untried and untrue. And you'll hear from Kay a little while later through our process. Right now, I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce some of our board members, VIPs, and team members that are joining us this evening. From the Chamber Board, President Brad Kendall, Ashdown Capital. Our Vice President, Ken Dennis, the Dennis Network of Companies. Past President, Jack Nicholson, Otter Co-op. Community Director for the City of Langley, Jenny Hinch from Lucid Water. Community Director from South Langley, Allison Killeen, CBM Lawyers. Community Director for North Langley, Frank Buckholtz. Our Director, Joanne Saunders from KPU. Our Director, Cynthia Drager from Mortgage Alliance. And Director Brody McIntosh from Bromac Mechanical. Some of the elected officials joining us this evening are MLA Mary Polak from Langley, Mayor Val Vandenbroek from the City of Langley, Councillor Paul Albrecht from the City of Langley, Councillor Rosemary Wallace from the City of Langley, Councillor Rudy Stortenboom from the City of Langley. Our chamber staff represented here this evening is Christy Meyer, our Director of Member Relations, and Sumner McCauley, our Events Coordinator. And I'd like to thank my team and those that aren't with us this evening for all their hard work in pivoting, for everybody's favorite new word, into how we move forward with our dinner meetings and all of the different events that we've brought you over the past few weeks. I am going to do some screen sharing right now. Oh, I got something in the chat box. Okay, dealt with that. So I just want to bring up. So just a quick update from the CEO of the Chamber. We've been working diligently in the background since all of this broke, and we've all been working from home as a team. I am in the office a couple of days a week just because Zoom calls have been such that it requires me to be in the office some days. Some of our upcoming events, we've got some webinars taking place this week on managing your teams remotely, the importance of mental and physical health during a crisis, financial relief from businesses. I think everybody in the room would agree that these are some things that everybody can utilize. So those webinars are open to our members and non-members. You can find the information on our website. We're also hosting one of our coffee and conversations with our elected officials this week. Rich Coleman will be joining our board member Frank Buckholtz for a conversation on upcoming issues. And of course, I'm sure there'll be some talk about COVID. And we also are hosting next week, I'm really excited about this one, a town hall for WorkSafe BC. So that, again, all of that information is on our website. You can sign up to get the Zoom links. We are accepting questions in advance. So if you have a specific question for WorkSafe BC, please get it in advance so that we can have the information to them. We all know that this information is changing constantly and being updated every day, but as we're going to try and bring you the most current and vital updated information on that day. So if you can bear with us on that. And in June, on June 4th, I'd like to announce that we're hosting our first virtual business after hours. Moxie's and the Sandman Inn, just down the road here in Langley, is hosting. They're going to give us a virtual tour of the facility, and they're going to show us how to make a couple of cocktails while we get to network. They're also doing some added dinner discounts if you'd like to do some takeout from that. As to our COVID response, many of you know on our website, we have actually a COVID webpage. If you click through and just click on that and go down, it's been broken up a little bit to sort of streamline the information because there's so much information on there. We have a whole list of PPE and supplies that you can find locally through our members and through other sources, plus recovery planning, which is sort of the stage we're at now, all the WCB information, plus financial support information. Below that, you'll find everything that has been posted for the past 8 weeks. So if there was a link or something you were looking for, we haven't taken that information away. It is still there for you. That's all from me today, and I would really like to now take an opportunity to welcome and thank our board member, Jenny Hinch, who is going to pop up and do our membership report.
Okay.
And I'm going to hand it over to Jenny, and I'm going to mute myself so she doesn't have to listen to me. So over to you, Jenny.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to do the membership report tonight, and as you know, I'm the community director for Langley City. So it's my pleasure to present the membership report here this evening. The purpose of this report is to recognize our new members and, of course, to request your approval to accept these new applicants into our Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce. Before I introduce the new members that are here this evening, I will advise you of the new applicants who unfortunately were unable to join us. And there's quite a few, so bear with me. We have Aging with Grace, Family Caregiver Mentoring and Support Services, Alpha Clean Tech Labs, Inc., Body Smart Health and Fitness, Elite Virtual Assistant, Fort Langley Community Improvement Society, Handicapped Pets Canada, Land Sign Landscape Construction 2017 Limited, Langley Aero Structures Limited, Marvin Gardens, Precious Moments Children's Center Limited, Rempel Mercantile, Shine City Pressure Washing, Snag Mortgage Team, Three Peaks Kinesiology Inc., and Zone 51 Sales Group Inc. Is that it? Oh yes, and now I would like to announce the new members that are here with us tonight on the call. So we do have Chris Jones from 604 Plumbing Services, and Massey Bakshian from Adult Cognitive Wellness Center, and Taco Van Popta MP. So I don't see anybody here, but now, because now I would like to have a motion to accept these new applicants into our membership, but I don't see anybody's hands.
I will motion.
Oh, okay, there we are, Cynthia, thank you. And who else? Allison? Okay, thank you very much. Great, so now it's my pleasure to introduce our president of the Chamber of Commerce, Brad Kindle.
Thanks, Jenny. Before I kind of jump into the advocacy report that we've got for, I guess it's for the last few months, given we haven't had the opportunity to have a traditional dinner meeting in a couple months, and hopefully we get back to our normal way of doing these sooner rather than later. But I think the all realistic side of it, we're probably going to be having virtual meetings for the foreseeable future. I can't see them allowing 200 people to get into a room to share and break bread. So thanks everybody, first off, for coming. I know this is probably unusual for all of you as it is for me. So we really appreciate you coming on and spending the evening with us. Hopefully everybody, one thing we missed was, Colleen, I believe you were supposed to encourage people at 5 o'clock to grab a bite and a drink for yourself. So for those that haven't been to the meetings in person, most people walk around with a drink in their hand, whether it's a coffee or a water or or a beverage of some sort. So again, thank you everybody for coming. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks to those that have participated in the last couple of months. We've hosted a number of online webinars and networking events. So thanks to those that have attended those. The more people on there, the better those can be. And as a reminder, there are links, I believe, Colin, you can confirm, to if you want to watch some of these webinars that have happened in the past. There are links. Is it on the Chamber website or is it in the YouTube feed? Colin can confirm that after. So thanks.
They're all links on the website and or the YouTube channel, either way. Perfect.
Nailed it. So yeah, thanks to all the businesses and organizations, obviously, from the Chamber that are working to keep us safe and fed and healthy. Everybody that's been essential through these times, and thanks to the members on the other side of it that have done the tough, hard burden of shutting their doors and are obviously feeling the financial burden of that. So thanks to those that have and have done that to keep everybody safe. And hopefully now with the reopening of phase 2, we can gradually see a lot of those businesses come back and strive and succeed. Thanks again to all the members that are continuing to renew membership. We've always been a part of the Langley community, but now more than ever, we're here for the members. We're doing, I talk, I think every time I get up on stage, I talk about advocacy and the work that we do kind of behind the scenes as a chamber. Everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, but most people see the chamber and join the chamber to come to networking events. And it's kind of been a flip-flop where traditionally, I would always argue that to a lot of people, the biggest benefit of the membership is these networking events and meetings. It's obviously a lot tougher now in today's environment to do that. But the really, the positive thing is that now we're, as a chamber, able to really shine with all the true advocacy work that we're doing behind the scenes. So, I mean, there is a lot going on between the BC Chamber, Canadian Chamber, stuff that's coming up. I think the really cool thing is that this is an opportunity where we've seen the Prime Minister, talking, and the chambers have been highlighted in many different occasions where the Prime Minister's highlighted discussions that he's had with the Canadian Chamber. And the Canadian Chamber is the voice of the BC and all the other provinces chamber, and then the BC Chamber is a voice of Langley, and then obviously Langley as a chamber, we are the voice of all our members. So this is a time where we're doing a lot more than ever. There are several members of the board, including myself and a few of the others that are on the call, and even our CEO, Colleen, that have joined the township and the city and working towards recovery and reopening through task force and other different participation. Colleen is working at both the provincial and federal level to help more businesses access the announced programs. And we're working with our network to lobby for changes to programs that have been announced that haven't necessarily hit in the way that maybe everybody was hoping. So we continue to do that. As Colleen mentioned, we've also got a dedicated page of information up on our site that has direct links to all the programs, the how-to. There's some the white pages of how to get everything done. So feel free to check there, or of course, reach out to myself, any of the board members, any of the staff, if you've got any questions relating to any of that. As we start to open phase 2, we reiterate we're here for you. We've got all the information with the upcoming the WorkSafe BC information's on our site. But with respect to anything, if you have questions, like I said, don't be afraid to reach out. We've even got kind of got our hands on all the different suppliers of all the PPE that's necessary to really get through this phase 2, and the highlight of that is that the local suppliers of that. So like I said, reach out, and thank you again, everybody, for joining us. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our sponsor of the month, representing Envision Financial, Kay Gandam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kay Gandam, branch manager of the Willoughby branch of Envision Financial, division of First West Credit Union. During these unprecedented times, we appreciate you being here tonight for the Chamber's first ever virtual dinner meeting, and it's been fun so far. I love the networking. I'm absolutely delighted to be here tonight as a dinner meeting sponsor. As many of you know, Envision Financial is a credit union and a cooperative, so creating capacity and bettering lives in our communities is essential to who we are as an organization. So it goes without saying that the ongoing COVID-19 situation has had a dramatic impact on our community. So I just wanted to share a little bit about how Envision Financial has been supporting through this time. So when this situation started evolving, we took immediate action towards lending a hand to our local friends and neighbors who were impacted. We worked with the charitable organizations we have strong partnerships with and expedited the funding we had set aside for them, getting them these much needed funds as quickly as possible. So I'm not sure if everyone has heard of our signature cause, but we donated $60,000 to our food banks in our BC communities as part of our signature cause called the Full Covered. We've also been forging new partnerships with organizations that are supporting emergent COVID-19 relief efforts. So Envision Financial is committed to helping our members make sense of the constantly changing business landscape, which we've heard about today, and Brad's talked a little bit about as well. But what we've done is from reducing the impacts of COVID-19 on their businesses to protecting them against cyber threats. So along with this new technology that everyone is getting used to and using more often, we wanted to make sure that we were doing some education on the cyber threats while working from home. We continue to provide these essential banking services. We are considered an essential services, so to keep our doors open was very important to us. And to be able to give expert financial advice through these times of uncertainty, because sometimes I've realized over the last couple of months, this is where people need us the most, and we've been able to, again, keep our doors open and make sure that we deliver, albeit a little differently, but deliver some financial advice and guidance. On behalf of Envision Financial, I would like to thank the Langley Chamber of Commerce team for having us here this evening and giving us the opportunity to be the dinner meeting sponsor. And thank you as well to everyone who's joining tonight. It's my first virtual chamber meeting, so it's nice to have a little bit of networking and just have some reconnections with all of you. So thank you for being here tonight. And now what I'm going to do is I'd like to introduce your keynote speaker for this evening. So Jeremy Stone has 20 years of community economic development experience throughout North America and internationally. His career has included nonprofit lending to historically marginalized entrepreneurs, community economic development planning with rural and urban communities, and extensive small business technical assistance and consulting. So Jeremy is also a leader in economic resilience and has worked on various disaster recoveries, including Hurricane Katrina, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, the economic recovery of Lower Manhattan after 9/11, and the 2013 Colorado floods. Jeremy's been busy. Currently, Jeremy is the director of the Community Economic Development Program at Simon Fraser University. Previously, Jeremy was a senior financial analyst at Seedco Financial, where he co-managed a $20 million grant and loan program following Hurricane Katrina and developed the Southeast Louisiana Fisheries Assistance Center, a first of its kind initiative that provided ongoing financial and technical assistance to commercial fishers. He's also a former Peace Corps volunteer, where he served with the National Chamber of Commerce in Mongolia, and a former economic development program manager for EcoTrust Canada, where he provided business planning services to First Nations and sustainable fisheries businesses. Jeremy received his MPA in International Economic Development from New York University and his BA in Anthropology from Reed College, where he studied the effect of cargo cults on economic development in the South Pacific. He's currently completing a PhD in community and regional planning at the University of British Columbia, where his research is focused on analyzing retail and housing gentrification after disasters. That's a mouthful. So take it away, Jeremy.
All right, thanks so much. Can you all hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here today. And I just want to say, as a former resident of New Orleans and a diehard Saints fan, I love the Breeze jersey that I've seen in the background of one of the cameras. So thanks for that. I think that was just for me. So thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. Anyway, this is a very different conversation to have with you today than I typically have. With COVID-19, everything has changed. And especially for me, you know, I've been doing economic recoveries for a long time and speaking about economic resilience to anyone who would listen. I've been sort of banging down the door, you know, all over the province over the past couple of years, trying to say, hey, you know, we need to get ready for economic disruption. And, you know, some people listen, some people don't. And now suddenly everybody's in the middle of it, you know, and everybody, you know, some folks are scrambling, some are on top of it and you know, pushing forward, but we're all in it now. And so I think this fundamentally changes the conversation, and I think it changes in a good way. I think that right now we're in a space where we can have really productive conversations about this sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and do a brief PowerPoint deck. Sorry if this makes the dinner not as fun anymore, but I just have a few things to say, maybe 15 plus minutes, and then we'll just open it up for Q&A and we can have a conversation. So let me just share my screen real quick. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can see that. If something goes wrong, just give a shout. So basically, normally when we talk about hazards, we're talking about climate change induced hazards, fires and floods, that sort of thing, and then earthquakes. COVID, we talk in the disaster field, we talk a lot about pandemics just because it's rare and weird and different. And, there's been some planning around it, but not a considerable amount. But now, this is a major hazard that not everybody has really planned for. But with those changes, we're seeing even despite those changes, we still see a lot of similarities between hazards. Whether it's a flood or pine beetle infestation or the closure of stores on main streets, economic downturn in general, whether it's a major employer closure, there are lots and lots of similarities between how we react and how hazards impact us, but also how we react in terms of recovery or programming, the things that we do. Almost every time you see, business supports and programs come out from the government, they're almost always the same. We're looking at subsidies, we're looking at grants, we're looking at loans. And there's a lot of direct technical assistance in terms of, the normal, ways of jumpstarting the economy. We look a lot at buy local programming, a lot of volunteer work trying to help businesses, reopen, etc. So really, I take an all hazards approach to this. I don't look at it as just, what do we do in terms of earthquake or what do we do in terms of, some other disruption. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing with COVID is the exact same stuff that I would have done with any other disaster recovery, with the exception that there's no physical destruction in this. So we're not necessarily looking at, well, how do we rebuild a commercial corridor? We're also looking at a lot of, we're just focusing on the disruption to businesses specifically. I normally have had to do this slide to convince people of why economic resilience is important. I don't think I have to anymore, but I'll just, pitch these out for anybody who, has not heard of this kind of stuff. Businesses are important. They provide our critical life needs. And I think we know that now more than ever, but, food, medicine, clothing, even the structures we live in, all this stuff is provided by the private sector. So we need businesses, to be there for us. But businesses are also beacons of recovery. Anytime there's a disaster, there's a disruption. If you have a mass evacuation, when people come back, if there's an evacuation and they're just allowed to come back to town, and we've seen this in High River, Fort Mac, other places. If you don't have the grocery store back and you don't have someone's job back and you don't have a daycare back, people don't come back. They wait until businesses reopen to provide those critical life needs so that then they can move back. Some, will be much more self-actualizing, but a lot of people will stay where they are and wait it out. And if you don't get them before September, a lot of disasters typically up this way happen in the summer. And so, fires and floods, etc. If you don't get people back home by September, then they're putting their kids into school locally and they might not ever come back. So it's really important to get businesses online to say, hey, we're in the process of recovery, come home. Businesses provide basics for individual recovery. So, all the things that you need to recover and rebuild your home if it's damaged, etc. Those are provided by businesses. And then finally, local businesses are accountable. When, what we've seen in a lot of other disasters is that a fraud happens often. And then also People will take money and they'll just leave town, or they'll start working on something and it'll be really shoddy material, and then they get back in their van and they go, and we never see them again. And so it's very important to have local businesses come back online as soon as possible, so that whenever they're doing that recovery work, that you have some accountability. They're not going to steal as much as other businesses just because everybody knows who they are. So when we at SFU talk about resilience, we talk about community economic resilience. We're a community economic development program, and so we really put the focus on community. And so, if you wanted a definition of that, it's maintaining our well-being while adjusting to constant changes in the world around us. This really puts the emphasis on the economy as a machine for well-being. The economy doesn't exist just for profit and just for creating more wealth. It exists to meet all those needs we were just talking about. And so, the question with community economic resilience is, how do we maintain that community well-being when everything is in flux? So a couple of principles that we live by is, number one, that we put well-being and livelihoods at the center of planning. If you're doing your economic development planning, doing emergency management planning, economic resilience planning, we're always trying to think of, well, what is furthering well-being and livelihoods, not just maintaining profit and wealth. Those are obviously included in well-being, but they're not the only pieces. We try to look at resilience as being something as inclusive and holistic. Typically in this little square, I have a photo of somebody selling garlic on the side of the road. I do a lot of work around rural BC, but the urban equivalent is just like the hot dog cart or a soup cart. A lot of times when we look at some of these programs and some of our focus for economic disruption, we're only looking at storefront businesses. But there are a ton of businesses that are very small, that are home-based, and they're contributing to people's livelihoods. And similarly, there are lots of vulnerable populations that are not always included in the planning processes for economic resilience. So trying to be inclusive and as holistic as possible is important. And then finally, spreading the responsibility across the whole community. I'll come back to this in a minute, but one of the most important things is that the responsibility for economic recovery, economic resilience is not just on the backs of the Chamber of Commerce and the economic development officers. It's the whole community. And I think that we've seen a lot of that in the most recent response to COVID. A lot of people in our communities are really getting behind their businesses. They're trying to support as much as possible. But, from a planning perspective, there are lots of different people and lots of different agencies in our communities that hold pieces of resilience. And we have to support them and get them integrated in this process, so it's not just the same 4 or 5 people in town who are responsible for this kind of thing. We can't really go any farther without talking about business continuity planning. That always seems to be the focus whenever we talk about economic resilience. Do businesses have continuity plans? I'm sort of iffy on business continuity planning. I obviously think that businesses should prepare, they should plan as much as possible, but there are a lot of different variables that we can't plan for, especially as individual businesses. Moreover, when you actually look at the planning tools out there on the market, there are a lot of them, but a lot of them are really long and cumbersome. They're difficult for businesses to deal with. And the fact is that a lot of businesses don't have the capacity to run their daily operations and then do something additional like create a business continuity plan. I myself, who run a program at SFU that I try to run, it's a separate program, I try to run it like a business. There's just a bazillion things I would love to do and that I never have time to do. And all of us are just struggling to make it. And then, if someone were to come to me and say, I need a business continuity plan for your program, I'd say, well, I don't know if I have time for that. But the point is that, business owners need easy ways to plan. There's some work that I've done in other contexts where we really strip down the whole process and try to do a quick and easy support for businesses. But the second thing is that business continuity plans won't solve everything. A lot of people are going to, a lot of businesses are going to be impacted no matter what. And that leads us to this, thing that I try to do some myth busting around, and I think COVID has hopefully busted this myth totally. A lot of communities take the approach that businesses take care of themselves. I've heard so many governmental, people say this. Different agencies will say, like, look, we're focused on, in emergency management, say we're focused on saving lives, putting out fires, saving structures. Businesses take care of themselves. And the fact is that no, businesses don't take care of themselves. They're overwhelmed with personal impacts of a disaster, as well as the loss of their business. And so, in addition to all the supports that we provide individual people, we also need to consider, well, how do we support businesses? How do we create plans and create procedures that actually support our economy and help it rebuild after disaster? Some of the other things that I think are important to talk about in terms of, just the individual supports directly to businesses are things like buy local campaigns. That's, definitely been promoted a lot with COVID. Joplin, Missouri did a really excellent job of business continuity planning, buy local campaigning after the tornado. They had many businesses reopen, like something like 80 or 90%, which is kind of unheard of. But then they also had 250 new businesses open. And it wasn't just all about the buy local campaign, but it was definitely about the city focusing really strongly on businesses, making these signs, these green signs that say open for business, and they put them on every single business that was open. I haven't even seen that done in our area with any systematic approach, but having something bright and green that says, hey, we're open, when you can't tell which businesses are open and which are closed. After hurricanes and tornadoes and things, it's very difficult to see what is, what's open and what's not. And with COVID, it's exactly been the case. It's been difficult going down the street. Well, is that place open or are they not? So, doing things like this really help their business community. In Christchurch, they had to close down the majority of the downtown after the earthquake, just because there were so many buildings compromised. But at the same time, that was all their commercial corridors, like their major business centers were all disrupted. And so eventually what they did was set up a container city outside of that downtown area, and focused on finding new places for business. And I think that, whether or not we start container cities, or whether or not we, just like we take places like gymnasiums or community centers, and we use those to triage people who have been displaced from their homes or who have been injured in a disaster, we should also be choosing, industrial facilities and other vacant storefronts or whatever we have to also triage businesses and think about, alternate locations for them. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I've just gotten off base here with my PowerPoint. And then finally, one of the big things is just technical assistance. As we've seen in so many disasters, businesses just don't know what to do. A lot of times they can't even deal with a bureaucracy on a day-to-day basis, like getting licenses and permits and going through all these processes. It's even more difficult when they have to then go through, like a recovery process, get access to funds, et cetera. So, Community Futures across BC has done a really great job over the past few years of having their business ambassadors program, going out and supporting small businesses individually to apply for programming, et cetera. But also what was really critical was that they changed the way that they did financing, so that they had a lot of payment holidays and restructuring of loans, as well as emergency loans of $10,000 to lots of businesses, so that they could try to recover as quickly as possible. A lot of times, $10,000 isn't a lot, but it's enough to maybe buy some new inventory or hire someone for a few months. With the wage subsidy, there's been I think a lot of positive impacts for businesses, but that's not the only thing that people need. So it's good to have these programs going. So I'm just going to try to buzz through the rest of the slides. I do know that I only have about 5 or 10 minutes left to jabber at you, but I want to make some points about planning. You know, when we're looking at our economic resilience plans, or when we're thinking about, well, how do we actually prepare? I think we have to ask ourselves some core questions. And one question is, who are the businesses and workers most critical to our basic needs and livelihoods? I've already mentioned some, you know, like the grocery store and the pharmacy. Daycares are always huge. Major employers we always think about. But I always like to point out the dollar store. You know, dollar stores are hugely important to low-income populations, not just to get cheap stuff, but also to get food. There are a lot of people who do their food shopping at dollar stores, and even though, you know, dollar stores represent like a sort of climate change nightmare from a plastics perspective, and also you know, a health nightmare just in terms of the packaged foods, they're still essentially important. And so, you know, we have to be asking ourselves, you know, what's our plan for the dollar store? You know, do we have a plan for them to come back? One way that we get at this is through asset mapping. So the Resilientville program in San Francisco has done this, where, you know, they've sat down with communities and said, you know, what are the important resources for you that might be compromised during disaster? Like, what's important to you? And they've done this also from, you know, an economic perspective. What are the stores that you rely on every day, so that they can get an idea in a neighborhood, well, you know, what is meaningful to us? And this is an opportunity for people to then go out and talk to those businesses and say, do you have a business continuity plan? If, you know, something happened, how could we support you? It creates social capital, but it also identifies, you know, what's important and how we can protect that. The next thing that we ask is, you know, how are economic development and emergency management plans supporting economic resilience? So, you know, really these plans live in separate worlds. And I've done a lot of work where we've gone into, you know, economic development plans and emergency management plans for different municipalities, and we've scored them. We have a matrix that we go through, and we scored them on, you know, how much economic resilience was embedded in the plans, and we've found very little. You know, economic development plans focus on economic development. They typically don't focus on disruption to the economy. Emergency management plans, same thing. You know, they focus on emergency management, and they don't think or really talk about, you know, economic recovery. Somebody's got to have a plan. There's got to be some sort of either bridging plan or some, you know, embedding of economic resilience concepts in these plans in a way where they talk to each other, and we have that sort of infrastructure set up. Most recently, I've been working on a project in the Kootenays with Community Futures and Selkirk College, where we've been doing economic resilience planning for 8 communities there. So we've been doing intensive community engagement and working with economic development stakeholders and emergency management stakeholders. And we've built these economic resilience plans that bridge the 2 different sets of plans and allow them to have a full you know, structure for responding to any kind of economic disruption. And what's interesting is that in the middle of doing this, COVID hit. And so now they've been like, you know, we've been rushing to get the plans back to them. And then they've been, you know, sort of adopting some of the methods and implementing it. It's been kind of crazy, but it's been great because they've already been having these conversations. They already had a structure thought out. And so they were able to adapt that to COVID. We've also been doing these mill closure assessment teams, and I only bring this up because, you know, part of recovery, I think, as well is focusing on what's the future of the economy. You know, I don't know if anyone saw, but I had an article in the Vancouver Sun this weekend, and the main point was that we're going to have business closures no matter what. And so, how are we going to focus on, you know, the next phase of the economy? What are we doing to fill vacant storefronts on Main Street? How do we move into innovation and values-based businesses like social enterprise and sustainable business? Well, you know, one of the things we have to do is do an assessment of what are our assets, what are our opportunities, and how do we move forward? And so, you know, this project with the mill closures focused on, you know, what are the opportunities in communities that need to economically diversify because a mill has closed. But it's also something that we're talking with other communities about doing after COVID. and, you know, really helping them to think out, well, how do we actually diversify so that, you know, we're not just dependent on one sector, or that we, you know, have more resilient businesses in total. Another question that we ask is, who are the businesses and workers most vulnerable to disruption, and how can we reduce their vulnerabilities? I always show a picture like this, and, you know, when we usually talk from an emergency management perspective, we look at a town and we're like, okay, so, you know, what's the risk here of a 100-year flood? And you might look and you say, well, all these businesses on the ground floor are at risk, you know, because the floodwaters will go up 5 feet. So they're all at risk of flooding. But the fact is that when you look at it from a vulnerability perspective, they're all very differentially impacted. You know, some businesses will close down forever because they're highly vulnerable. They don't have any savings. They don't have insurance. They, you know, had some vulnerabilities that were pre-disaster. But others will thrive and will continue on. Or maybe, you know, they can just, they're like, much of their work is virtual. They can just move online. Others can't move online because they sell physical goods and services. So, so we always say, well, how do you actually measure vulnerability? Like, how do you learn about that, and how do you work that into your planning? This slide is just from something that we talked about in Coquitlam recently, where we said, you know, if you want to understand your community from a perspective of vulnerability, you have to, you know, you can't just have your quantitative data of, you know, well, you know, how many, you know, businesses are below, you know, the flood level. You actually have to ask people really, you know, direct questions about, do you have a business continuity plan? Do you have business interruption insurance? You know, how much is that insurance? Do you have savings? There's all kinds of information you want to find. And this doesn't have to be like a really expensive process. This can be something that you can work with your local universities and have, you know, graduate projects that do some of this research. You can collaborate with some of the local business publications or the Chamber of Commerce, and get to businesses and ask them these questions. It can just be a little bit at a time, but resilience is cumulative. And the more that you learn, the more you add to your understanding, and the more you develop processes to respond to it. And then, you know, I think this is the last thing, you know, our whole community approach to resilience is, how do you really spread all of this responsibility across the whole community? You know, a lot of times when there's economic disruption, people look immediately to government. Some people look immediately at the businesses and say, hey, you got to take care of yourselves. Sometimes the emergency managers are involved. But there's a whole like group of other people out there that are key players. And you know, one thing I'd like to point out, you know, specifically is nonprofits. A lot of us forget that all of our local nonprofits and charities have a lot of connections to the business community. If you have an LGBTQ nonprofit, they're liaising with a lot of LGBTQ business owners. If you have a New Canadians, you know, nonprofit or charity, they're working with a lot of New Canadian business owners. There's just all kinds of intersections with our business community, and those organizations have a role after a disaster happens. You know, they have a role to play in terms of case management, in terms of learning what the needs are, in terms of reaching populations that maybe have never been contacted before by the city, or never been contacted before by the Chamber of Commerce, but they've been out there. And so there are lots of different folks to integrate into this process, and you want to have a plan beforehand that identifies who those are, and be able to deploy those resources rapidly. I always like to give a shout out to Tara Stroup in Port Coquitlam. If you don't know her, she's an amazing person, and she's done a lot of really great work over the past few years on you know, not only economic recovery planning, but business continuity planning. They developed a toolkit for their businesses locally. She's gotten a lot of awards. And what is really important to me about Tara is that she did it all off the side of her desk. You know, this wasn't her primary job. This was something that she just had a passion for, and did it incrementally, and, you know, year by year added a little bit more and a little bit more. She used volunteers heavily, some of their ESS volunteers, et cetera. And she's done an amazing job of just putting together all those resources and getting Port Coquitlam more prepared. And so, you know, if you just want to go down the street and talk to her at some point, or just look at the Port Coquitlam case study. I think it's really good. So that's it for me. If you want to get in touch, always email or call. I'm around. Right now, I'm trying to take some time off work, but Sumner convinced me that this would be an amazing idea to do, and I'm just really happy to be here. So if there's any time left for questions that I haven't squandered, please feel free to ask. Thanks so much.
Jeremy, thank you so much for coming out tonight and for leaving the comfort of your home. Not really. So thank you very, very much for the insight, and also thank you for pivoting your scenario. We had talked to you back in February when we were looking at building our economy's resilience towards these things when one hit. So we really, really appreciate you kind of changing it up and taking a look at it from this perspective. I'm happy to take any questions if people would like to. If you know how to raise your hand in the chat, you can. Or if you don't feel comfortable, you can type into chat. We'll take some questions. Or if you're feeling really out there, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and pop online, and we'll let you ask your question of Jeremy. While people are typing and or unmuting, I have one quick question.
Sure.
If you had a crystal ball, because everybody really wishes they had one right now, comparative to extreme weather events and other things, how do you think the length of COVID's effect on the economy versus a normal emergency?
I mean, I always hate speculating because who knows? I mean, there are just so many variables. It could go really well or not. Personally, and I apologize for this, I think the worst is yet to come. And I say that for just a couple of reasons. One is that when you're talking about these other disasters, generally you have a recovery boom, but that will not happen with this because there was no destruction. So there's not going to be all that spending into buying new stuff for your home and, rebuilding, et cetera. Generally there is solidarity buying that happens. So like people will come from outside the community and start shopping at stores because they're like, we stand with, Joplin, or we stand with New Orleans. That won't happen either, probably because most people, most of the world is impacted right now. So everybody's spending locally, but there's not those external dollars coming in. And then finally, the government is spending billions of dollars on this, and, that's great, but I don't think it will be enough. I mean, when you look at like New Orleans, it was like $80 billion that went into that, one area to rebuild, and that was like a really, extreme event. But I just don't see the level of spending from the government happening here like this. And to round out all these horrible things I'm saying, we're also likely going to see a lot of business closures no matter what. As the market starts again, not everybody's going to rush right back out and start buying jewelry and toys and all these things. They're actually, going to be, changing their purchasing habits. People have lost their jobs. People are wary. People are, not sure they're going to go into a store just because they're reopened. So, and somebody just said in the chat about, there in the fall, there might be another wave. That's absolutely true. And for other towns in BC, there's, potential fires and floods still on the horizon. I'm really sorry. Like, I hate to be the downer guy. I like to be positive and yay, but I just think we need to plan really well right now.
I agree. And I don't think you're the downer guy. I think you're the realistic person.
Maybe. Sorry.
No, it is what it is. Daniel Bennett, yes, you raised your hand. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question, please do.
Okay. Yes, I think I'm unmuted. One of the things that Shannon brought up in our group, our networking group, was the not-for-profits. I know we're talking business and that sort of thing, but the not-for-profits really don't have the skills to get back into this thing sometimes that maybe businesses do. Any advice as we've got a ton of nonprofits in Langley that are doing some phenomenal work. Any advice in that whole not-for-profit charity field through these type of things, and how these organizations can get kickstarted and get going again?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. You know, I think that nonprofits are businesses. You know, if you really look at how they function, everybody's got a bottom line they got to meet. Everybody's got to, you know, bring in money. And the problem is that, you know, nonprofits, and I've worked in nonprofits most of my career, you know, we're all dependent on funders and what the funding swings are. And so, I mean, the number one thing every nonprofit right now in their grant writing has to be writing COVID-19 grants. I mean, you know, whatever their work is, if it's, you know, helping trees, it's got to be, you know, COVID-19 impact on trees. Like you have to pivot to that point, because that's where a lot of the money is going to be going. And then I think also, you know, there's got to be some focus on diversifying income streams. And this has been true for the last 30 years at least, you know, just with neoliberalization, blah, 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 there's just less and less money out there. And so being able to, you know, adjust more and become social enterprise focused, I think has to be, you know, another part of this. You know, and sometimes that just means turning what you're doing as a grant funded activity into a consulting activity. You know, being able to say, hey, we've got immense expertise. You know, Sean Loney is a guy in Manitoba who's written a lot about a lot of the social enterprises he's developed out there, and he's done a lot of work with First Nations in Manitoba. And one of the things he talks about is outcomes purchasing. And he says, instead of asking for grants from the government, what we need to be doing is going to the government and saying, you want outcomes, you can buy them from us. And this is what we can deliver. And it's not just government, it's also corporations or other stakeholders saying, hey, you know, like, we've got expertise, we do things, and you want these things to happen, buy them from us. I think that that's a really poor answer to your question, because it doesn't solve, you know, that quandary. But I do think that nonprofits are going to be squeezed for the next couple of years, just like after 2008, after the economic downturn. I mean, there were so many layoffs. I got laid off over and over again, and I would get rehired as a consultant and then laid off as a consultant from the same organization. So, you know, it's tough.
Actually, I think that's a phenomenal answer when you think about it, whether you're a business or whether you're a not-for-profit business, going to somebody and saying, hey, what outcome do you want? I can deliver. Hey, I think that's phenomenal advice. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. No problem.
I'm really good at muting myself and forgetting I've muted myself. So you can read the question in there from Cynthia regarding 2008. Compared to what happened in the markets in 2008, we're seeing COVID having more of an immediate and extreme effect on the markets. And this is only the beginning. You know, what event would you compare this to in our history? I don't know that there is one.
Yeah, I mean, not in recent history. I mean, I definitely know, you know, they've been talking a lot about the Spanish influenza of the early 1900s and whatnot. But yeah, I think this is absolutely unprecedented in modern history, because it's, you know, a lot of times when you look at disaster impacts, a lot of people try to measure them based on GDP. And GDP is a really terrible indicator of disaster impacts, because, you know, there's a lot of spending that comes with the disaster, and there's a lot of loss, and they kind of even out again. And so GDP always bounces back really quickly. And there's also, you know, money that slushes over from other parts of the economy into this part of the economy. So if you look at the national scale, it all kind of evens out. I think GDP will actually be a really consistent indicator this time around, because everybody is seeing degrowth, everyone is seeing loss, and that's very unusual. I would never suggest that we look at GDP for anything, you know, like it's a really good indicator of economic health and whatnot. But this time around, it's different.
And I agree with you. I think that with economies that were already flush and doing quite well, they might come out of this a bit better because of that. It's all going to depend. This too shall pass, yes. And Rudy also mentioned looking for opportunity in every situation. It's definitely, there is no rule book, there's no playbook for this. And like you said, it's affected every country, every continent pretty much has had an effect moving forward. So
Yeah.
Are there any further questions from anybody? I don't see any raised hands, and one more info in the chat box. Oh, question to Jeremy.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is exposing a lot of problems right now in terms of connectivity, especially in rural areas around the province, because a lot of communities have poor internet or people just lack internet access. But that's true in cities as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that we're going to see some issues with this disaster pushing more business online anyway. And so it's going to, further decouple, lower income people or unconnected people from the economy. And then, we've also seen that with cash, the fact that cash has been used less and less. A lot of low income people rely on cash. I mean, that's, their primary mode of income. And so, I mean, outside of, social supports. So, there's a lot of, I think, impacts or around some of these issues that we have to figure out. Well, do we get everybody access to the internet? Do we get everybody access to bank cards? How do we actually deal with these issues? Um, I guess I'd like to say one more thing, just in case we get cut off soon, because I do know people are going to want to move on and maybe actually eat dinner if they haven't done it in our virtual dinner. I just think that, there have been a couple of comments about like, hey, this too shall pass, etc. But I definitely think that we have to be proactive right now and not just about business retention. We have to really be investing into the future of the economy. I think a lot of what I've seen out in the lending environment is like sudden risk avoidance. Everybody's pulling back. Nobody wants to put money into anything, or if they do, it's only to their prime customers. I think that is the absolute wrong approach. I think right now we have to be investing into our economy, into new entrepreneurship, into social enterprise and sustainability, all that stuff, because if we just focus on business retention, a lot of businesses are still going to go under. And then, a year or two from now, we're going to, the economy will dip and then it'll take a lot longer to come back up again. But if right now we start investing into new business and pivoting for current businesses, helping, the butchers become, restaurants or what have you, there's going to be losses, but I think that we're going to be able to really strengthen our economy more than if we just kind of, say, okay, well, now we're reopened, like go get her. I think we need to do more.
I agree. Rosemary, you had mentioned you'd like to ask a question. I will take it as the last question if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you for letting me ask this question. And you actually answered some of it in your last statement in regards to entrepreneurship. My question would be in regards to future education. And as our world is changing, and as we see this through COVID and how business is changing, do you think it's important that we look at our education systems and change the way we approach education and moving towards entrepreneurship and our economy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since I work at a university now, I'm really keen on education. Please take our community economic development certificate program. I know Nav from Langley is on our program right now, and she's awesome. I would say that the big thing is about what is the economy of the future. And that's sort of like a big question. But I think that, when we're thinking about, well, where are we going to put our eggs in the next 20 or 30 years? And how does that improve our well-being? And those are two sort of different questions sometimes. And so, what I'm worried about is that we'll continue to just double down on the usual attraction strategies and, usual, well, we're going to bring high tech to town, and tech is great. It's great to hire, 20 to 30-year-olds who, are really smart and like compute all the time. But at the same time, we have existing people in our cities, that need jobs. And definitely in Vancouver, we see it all the time that the blue collar middle class is being pushed out of the city, not just by housing prices, but by the fact that they can't find as many jobs locally as they used to. And so, I think that we have to have a varied economy. And sometimes that's going to mean, purchasing locally or regionally or planning locally and regionally. This is a roundabout way of saying that I think our education needs to be tailored to that, that we need to have, good economic opportunities and then also build up our residents to be able to take those opportunities. And sometimes there'll be, science and tech and whatnot, but we should also be thinking about, well, how do we do this inclusively so that we're also creating trades jobs and other things for people who are getting lost in the economic change, because we're having basically a lost generation of like 40 to 60-year-olds who are getting displaced from a lot of other opportunities. And I worry about what's going to happen to them, as they retire and move on to dependence, like of hopefully us younger people. But if they don't have younger people to support them, what are they going to do?
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy, again, for coming out this evening and giving us some insight. We really do appreciate it. I want to thank everybody again for attending this evening. Really, really appreciate you taking the time out to come out to our virtual dinner meeting. I would also like to take a moment to thank Envision Financial, and Kay, thank you so much for standing with us as a sponsor this evening. To everybody, have a great evening. Hopefully you get to enjoy some food and beverage, and we'll see you all very soon and hopefully next month at our next dinner meeting. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Colleen. Good night.